In this video, I'm going to go over how to add multiple commands to a single button press and also how to add delays to those commands so that you can send either the repeating command over and over again or send different commands to the same device and they'll all be received. So this time I'm going to actually use the Kodi button. I know we haven't integrated Kodi yet, but we're still going to need some of this functionality later on. To start with, I'm going to need two commands entered in here. One of them is going to be for the input button on my TV remote. Previously we've been using the Netflix button, and the Netflix button, as I mentioned before, basically overrides any previous input selection. So it doesn't matter if you were on HDMI 1 or HDMI 3 or the coax setting, it's always going to be able to get back to Netflix without an issue. However, this time our Kodi device is actually plugged into the receiver, so we're going to need to be able to change the receiver's input and the TV's input to look to the receiver. So to do this, we're going to do two things under devices. We're going to start by creating a new variable under our Vizio TV. This one we're going to call Vizio TV input toggle. It's going to be an IR command. We're also still going to be sending it out of module 1 port 3, and the command, I've got it here copied already, and we're just going to put that in there. And then the second one is going to be an IR command for the receiver, the TXNR636. I'm going to choose a new command here and we'll fill this out as well. My Kodi device happens to be plugged into the PC input slot on the receiver, so that's what we're going to trigger. Again, we're in port module 1 port 2, and here's the IR command for that one. Okay, so we've got both of our commands set up now. We're ready to start writing our macro. So we're going to go over here to the Kodi button, and again we're going to start here in the clicked events. Now previously when we were doing button actions, we were putting them down here in states, and as soon as you activate a clicked event, it actually overrides anything you had here in state variable, which is good because the state variable only allows us to activate one variable at a time, whereas within JavaScript we have an unlimited number of variables we could activate. So we're going to make sure that that's blank down there. It wouldn't matter even if it wasn't, because it wouldn't be used. So we're going to click on the triple ellipse button over here on the clicked events, and this time when we start writing our script, the first thing we're going to do is again back to the app command, because we do want to have home remote send this command, and the one that we want to do here is set variable value. It's a little ambiguous because we're not setting a value, we're actually more like calling an action value, but this is what we're going to use here, set variable value. As soon as I open the parentheses, IntelliSense is again going to kick on, and it's going to ask us which command we want to send. In this case, we want to send this IRPC input command. We're going to follow it up with a comma and then two double question marks here, indicating that we don't actually want to send anything, because the literal string between the double quotation marks is nothing or null. So we're going to pass a null command, meaning just send this command, don't attempt to pass any variable into it. We'll follow it up with the end parenthesis and then the semicolon to finish that command. We could go ahead and test at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and put the second one in here, and in this case it's going to be app set variable again. And this time we're going to put the input toggle from my remote. Okay, so now we've got both of the commands written in there, and what this is going to do is this first command is going to change the receiver input to PC toggle or PC input, and that is actually linked via HDMI input to the Kodi program running on my QNAP. Then I'm also going to want to change the TV's input to be expecting a signal from our receiver. Now my receiver and my TV are physically hooked up via an HDMI and optical audio cable, and that is on HDMI 5 on my TV. 5 is just HDMI that supports HDR playback in my case. The issue we're going to run into though is that I don't have a discrete command to send to my TV like I did my Vizio. For example, I'm sending a command to the receiver that says go exactly to this input number or input name, don't go to any others first. On the TV, I don't have that capability. All I have is an input button, and what it's going to allow me to do is just to scroll through the available inputs on the TV, and that's going to make it very challenging to get it onto HDMI 5 every time without fail. So if we want to go ahead and run this script as is, we can. We're going to click OK to save, start, and we're going to click this Run Kodi button, and we'll see what happens here. So it did go ahead and change the input, and you can see that the input button was pressed on the remote, but it was only pressed one time. And on this TV, I actually have to press it a number of times to actually scroll down this list of available inputs until I get all the way down here at the bottom to HDMI 5. And this is the result that we actually want to see when we're all said and done with the blue screen. So I'm going to trigger it back to Netflix so we're back at our correct starting point. Okay, so the way that we can resolve this issue is by sending the same command multiple times. In our case, I believe I need to send this same input toggle command 8 times in a row. So I'm just going to select this section, copy, and then paste it 7 more times. Okay, so now we've got the original receiver command and then 8 copies of the input toggle command, just like if I was hitting this button repeatedly. Let's test and see what happens this time. So you can see that the result was not what we were expecting, and that's because we didn't allow any delay time in between the time when it was sending these signals. The TVs and other infrared devices have a built-in lag time to allow for remotes to work the majority of the time. But when the global cache infrared repeater sends all 8 signals near simultaneously, the TV doesn't know how to react to that, so it just assumes that you were pressing it just one single time. So to resolve this, we're going to go back into the script editor, and this time we're going to insert some delays. The code for that is app.delay with a capital D. And this time, since we're not passing in literal text, instead we want to actually just put an integer to represent the delay. The delay in this case is measured in milliseconds, and I happen to know that about 500 milliseconds is the correct number for my TV and my equipment. Now, other TVs and equipment might be lower or may need a longer delay. Sometimes I've done as much as 2,000, indicating 2 seconds worth of delay between each command. And the first time you deal with a new system like this, I recommend doing some exhaustive testing just with simple commands such as input toggling or some other device button on your remote that's going to be well suited for this, maybe even power delays. Speaking of, power is a good option because a lot of times TVs have extensive power on time before they're available to receive an initial command after the power on command. I know my TV is really slow to start up, so sometimes I wait 5 to 10 seconds before I actually start sending commands after power on. But in my case, I happen to know that the right number is about 500, or roughly a half of a second. And what I'm going to do, oops, forgot the semicolon there at the end. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy that and insert that same command in between each one of these other infrared commands that we've already put. And I don't need to put one at the end because we're not going to be sending another command after this. So now we've got the receiver command, we've got a slight delay, and then we've got the input button being sent and a slight delay after each one of those. We'll hit OK, and let's test this out. Okay, perfect. So that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to get back to input 5. Now, you may be thinking it's going to be difficult to keep track of where I am on that list that I was cycling through. So for example, if I needed to get back from HDMI 5 to, let's say, HDMI 3, there's going to be some math there as to exactly how many commands I'm going to have to send. And look for tricks within your own system as to how to alleviate that. I know, for example, that the Netflix button on my remote overrides everything and always gets me back to the correct starting point when I make a input change like that. So for example, if I wanted to get to HDMI 3, the best scenario I might be able to do is to first activate Netflix and then count down 5, because I know I'm always going to start at the Netflix button on that column. Okay, so at this point we've successfully built a macro that has 2 commands, one of which we're sending multiple times to a single device. That's it for this one. We'll see you in the next one.